Mr. Burke looked up from his desk and asked, "Is there anything you want?" "No, thank you," said Madame Zilensky. She had a low, beautiful, somber voice. "I was only just wondering, you recall the metronome? Do you think perhaps I might have left it with that French?" "Who?" asked Mr. Burke. "Why, that French I was married to," she answered. "Frenchman," Mr. Burke said mildly. He tried to imagine the husband of Madame Zilensky, but his mind refused. He muttered half to himself, "The father of the children." "But no," said Madame Zilensky with decision, "the father of Sammy." Mr. Burke had a swift prescience. His deepest instincts warned him to say nothing further. Still, his respect for order, his conscience, demanded that he ask. "And the father of the other two?" Madame Zilensky put her hand to the back of her head and ruffled up her short cropped hair. Her face was dreamy, and for several moments she did not answer. Then she said gently, "Boris is of a Pole who played the piccolo." "And Sigmund?" he asked. Mr. Burke looked over his orderly desk with the stack of corrected papers, the 3 sharpened pencils, the ivory elephant paperweight. When he glanced up at Madame Zilensky, she was obviously thinking hard. She gazed around at the corners of the room, her brows lowered and her jaw moving from side to side. At last she said, "We were discussing the father of Sigmund." "Why, no," said Mr. Burke. "There's no need to do that." Madame Zilensky answered in a voice both dignified and final. "He was a fellow countryman." Mr. Burke really did not care one way or the other. He had no prejudices. People could marry 17 times and have Chinese children so far as he was concerned. But there was something about this conversation with Madame Zilensky that bothered him. Suddenly he understood. The children didn't look at all like Madame Zilensky, but they looked exactly like each other. And as they all had different fathers, Mr. Burke thought the resemblance astonishing. But Madame Zilensky had finished with the subject. She zipped up her leather jacket and turned away. "That is exactly where I left it," she said, with a quick nod. "Chez that French." Affairs in the music department were running smoothly. Mr. Burke did not have any serious embarrassments to deal with, such as the harp teacher last year who had finally eloped with a garage mechanic. There was only this nagging apprehension about Madame Zilensky. He could not make out what was wrong in his relations with her or why his feelings were so mixed. To begin with, she was a great globetrotter, and her conversations were incongruously seasoned with references to far-fetched places. She would go along for days without opening her mouth, prowling through the corridor with her hands in the pockets of her jacket and her face locked in meditation. Then suddenly she would buttonhole Mr. Burke and launch out on a long, volatile monologue, her eyes reckless and bright and her voice warm with eagerness. She would talk about anything or nothing at all. Yet, without exception, there was something queer, in a slanted sort of way, about every episode she ever mentioned. If she spoke of taking Sammy to the barber shop, the impression she created was just as foreign as if she were telling of an afternoon in Baghdad. Mr. Burke could not make it out. The truth came to him very suddenly, and the truth made everything perfectly clear, or at least clarified the situation. Mr. Brooke had come home early and lighted a fire in the little grate in his sitting room. He felt comfortable and at peace that evening. He sat before the fire in his stockinged feet, with a volume of William Blake on the table by his side, and he had poured himself a half-glass of apricot brandy. At 10 o'clock, he was drowsing cosily before the fire, his mind full of cloudy phrases of Mahler and floating half-thoughts. Then all at once, out of this delicate stupor, 4 words came to his mind: the King of Finland. The words seemed familiar, but for the first moment he could not place them. Then all at once he tracked them down. He had been walking across the campus that afternoon when Madame Zilensky stopped him and began some preposterous rigmarole to which he had only half listened. He was thinking about the stack of cannons turned in by his counterpoint class. Now the words, the inflections of her voice, came back to him with insidious exactitude. Madame Zilensky had started off with the following remark: "One day, when I was standing in front of a patisserie, the King of Finland came by in a sled." Mr. Brooke jerked himself up straight in his chair and put down his glass of brandy. The woman was a pathological liar. Almost every word she uttered outside of class was an untruth. If she worked all night, she would go out of her way to tell you she spent the evening at the cinema. If she ate lunch at the old tavern, she would be sure to mention that she had lunched with her children at home. The woman was simply a pathological liar, and that accounted for everything.